Jessica Tarlov, welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm sure you have a lot to say about what you've been seeing on television over the last couple weeks. The floor is yours.
I've been taking notes. Well, not really. This is definitely a heavy news day to come back, and very thankful to be here with you guys. You've done an amazing job covering this story. What I was struck by from at least today's news was that now Putin is 12, 13 miles from the NATO border, right? And there could be something intentional or unintentional that suddenly ends up in Poland or another NATO country. And then what? We know that the Biden administration is firmly against a no-fly zone. We don't want a war with Russia. But it seems like just a matter of time before NATO has to get involved or live up to what they've been saying, that if a NATO territory is struck, that they're going to. And are we actually going to do that? Because the American people keep saying that they're prepared to, that if a NATO country is struck, that we move ahead with that. But I'm not sure when that actually happens, which I think unfortunately will, if we can live up to that or if we're going to move forward.
What do you think the significance of that strike near the Polish border was, Judge Jeanine, where all of those foreign fighters were gathering?
I think it was very significant on several levels. Number one, the fact that they did it. Now, the claim now is apparently the missile came from Russia, okay? And so it's not, they're saying it could be intentional, it could be accidental, as you referenced. But then the question is, are they doing this intentionally to see what our reaction is? We already know that Biden pulled back the troops from the border that we had there, I think it was in November or December, that Biden hasn't gone through the nuclear exercises because he doesn't want to provoke. And, you know, Ronald Reagan believed in peace through strength, and Biden believes in peace through just intimidation, just being timid. Timidity, I guess, is the word. And now we've got to figure out how far do we go. This is getting real. Iran is watching. China's watching. Everybody sees that we keep pulling back. And the test is, if they decide it was intentional, then how far do you react? What is your reaction to something that isn't really that serious? I mean, it's almost as though we're looking for an excuse to not get involved, and we're emboldening Russia.
We're conducting a lot of significant NATO exercises in Norway right now, but as Jeanine said, we're inching closer day by day, each strike, to perhaps getting more involved than we already are.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of very understandable questions about what would trigger Article 5, right? And you look at the possibility of even cyber warfare. Does that potentially trigger Article 5 if they were to shut down or go after any sort of bases or any of our connections to anything in NATO? But, you know, I think the biggest question here is whether or not we are, as Fareed Zakaria discussed over the weekend, in a post-American era. So are we in a role of leadership? Who's looking to America right now to see what we will do? How much are we going to let Vladimir Putin push us? And that's really the central question, I think, here, because when you step back and look at it, who's looking to President Biden right now to say, what do we stand for? What matters? How much do we want to protect our role in the larger world? So now I'm hearing, and we're going to talk about this later, but that he's thinking about possibly going to Europe in a few weeks. Mm-hmm. And we've laid down what we won't do. We won't put boots on the ground. Said that from day one. We will not start World War III. Said that, day 3 in all of this. So it would be nice to hear, we will not allow Ukraine to fall to Putin. We haven't really made that commitment. No. So right now we're sort of managing a terrible situation from afar without a real clear message, I think, in terms of what we mean.
Yeah, Greg, the president hasn't really articulated specifically what Americans' national security interest is in Ukraine and what our current strategy is besides what our red lines are.
Are you suggesting that President Biden might not be engaged every day in serious issues? Because I'm afraid there might be a pattern here. There was a certain leader who was very slow on the crime. On the crime sprees. Also very slow on vaccines. Do you remember that? And also very slow on the supply chain problem, and then very slow on inflation. It seems to me that Biden is just slow, and that's the problem here. But I have to go back to what you said. I don't know when it was. What do? We either have to steel ourselves against these grim and ghoulish carnage, or we go all in. because I think that whenever we play in this kind of middle ground, we are looking for an excuse not to get in and looking for an excuse to get in at the same time. All it does is create more suffering. I keep going back. Where is the audacious diplomacy that something like this calls for? And an example, and I know this is going to cause some people to their heads to explode, which I enjoy. Look at Trump's North Korea gambit. All right. This, interestingly enough, remember that you remember the false nuclear strike that we thought that Hawaii was getting bombed. And this is after, after Obama had told Trump that the biggest pressing problem for the United States and for the world was North Korea, right? And so what does he do? Trump deflated an existential threat by removing the psychological threat that was perceived by North Korea, basically saying, we're not interested in blowing you up to smithereens. We'd love for you to communicate and cooperate with us, but that's it. We're not, he removed the psychological threat. There is a possibility for that here. It's just that nobody's come up with it. There is a way to audaciously mediate this as soon as possible and not wait 2 frickin' weeks. They got, you got to avoid the tripwires that you've already kind of crossed, and then you create a way, a face-saving way for both sides. And there's a few people who can do that. It's not Biden.
And the Russians aren't even speaking to us. They won't communicate. Well, we know that the UAE and the Saudis aren't taking our phone calls either. So how does, as Greg say, use diplomacy to achieve a quick end of these hostilities if no one's talking to the President of the United States?
Well, isn't that the point? I mean, no one is talking to him. And, he's talking about, as Martha said, he's talking about going to Europe in the next few weeks. I mean, what is he going to say? He doesn't project strength. No one is respecting us, and the truth is, if we can't get to the point where he walks in a room and you say the United States is here, then we're weak. They ignore us.
You looked like you wanted to say something.
I did, and now I'm going to.
You're a psychic.
No, I sensed a lot of eye rolling.
So from where I sit and where I have sat the last couple of weeks, I have seen a NATO alliance that is stronger than it has been in decades. I've seen a German chancellor taking moves against Russia that we've not seen in decades. I mean, remilitarizing a country that obviously has an incredibly difficult history with what we're seeing with an autocrat and potentially going on to use chemical weapons against their own people. I've seen a president who is using his chief skill, which is being a friend, someone who calls people, who talks to everybody. I mean, there are pictures of Macron after he talks to Putin. That's happened regularly. Yes, Putin wants to talk to Macron more than he wants to talk to Biden. But if you don't think that Macron is talking to Biden about every single thing that happens on those phone calls, I don't think we're living in the same universe here. So I do think
What is Biden saying?
What is Biden saying? That we want to avoid World War III. We stand with Ukraine. This is a democratic country. This is an ally. This is an ally, by the way, who had their javelins held up by the former president over getting some extra dirt, by the way. And then you hear these he got impeached over it. I mean, it's in transcripts, Judge.
Did the javelins get there?
Yes.
A little late. Well, then let's talk about timing.
It was more than the MREs that the previous administration was sending.
100%.
Did you want to say something about the fact that the Russians aren't taking Joe's phone calls?
It's incredible. I mean, when Trevor Noah is taking note of it, that, guess what? The Saudis and the UAE won't pick up the phone. I talked to Kurt Volker today, the former ambassador who was involved in all of that and has a long history with all of these countries. He said that's stunning. It is stunning that they won't pick up the phone and take the phone call from the president of the United States. And in terms of lethal weaponry that has gone to Ukraine, yes, you can go all through the impeachment moment with Zelensky. There's a lot there. But the fact of the matter is that the javelins were released. In fact, some of those weaponry systems were cut back under the Biden administration before they were then released. And when President Obama was asked by Ukraine to please send real weapons, they got MREs, as Jesse says. So the Democrat history on this is very weak. And President Trump sent them much more than anyone else had. That's the bottom line in terms of what they actually got.
He also wanted to disband NATO. Well, I mean, we're
no, he didn't. That's not true.
I want everyone to pay their fair share. He thinks that international organizations
He wanted to strengthen NATO. He said, I want all of you to pay what you have to pay, which, by the way, Germany is now finally doing. He strengthened NATO, actually.
Exactly.
and that was a perfect phone call.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.